Okay. This is more of an interactive session than a presentation. I wanted to show the tool that we're using right now for sort of keeping track of little projects that we're working on for NFSD. Rather than Jira, I decided to use the Kanban tool inside of GitHub. So I created two projects. One is for NFSD active features, and the other one is for NFSD testing and CI, which I mentioned this morning in the other room. So what I want to do is sort of show off what we've got going in the to-do and the unscoped.
Turn off these overhead lights. Should everybody else get the glare on the screen?
A little.
Yeah.
I want to look at the first and second columns on the left side. The third and fourth, you can look at later because I think this is visible. It might not be visible actually to people who are not in the project, but those are a little less interesting in the sense that the rightmost column is all the done projects, and the third rightmost column is in progress, which is just the stuff we're working on right now. And I think more interesting to this group of people is where do we think we want to go in the next, 2 to 5 years, and that's the leftmost and the column next to that, unscoped and to do. So I'm sorry this is an eye chart for people who are online, but I will do my best to read out the thing that we're looking at. So at the top of this list is handle BioVex natively in server-side RPC. I think Anna's also working on client-side. She's doing folios. That's related to this one. We think this is a kind of a pretty important project. It's just that there are lots of pieces that are not finished yet in the kernel proper to do it. And so that's why it's sort of on the to-do list rather than in the in-progress list.
What's the intention?
Either we want to use BioVec iterators in the transports. That seems to be where they're going with RDMA, for example, and I think also with sockets. On the other hand, if we have a folio iterator instead, we could use that. So this is more aspirational than I've got a definite plan here. This is more like we've got to focus on renovating the XCR buff API, and I mean you certainly have thoughts in that area as well. I'm just saying this is a kind of a placeholder for working on that effort. It's not a definite thing. There's an actual issue behind this, and I think that issue is actually visible to people outside the projects. And so if you have any thoughts or design notes, you can put them in the issue and it will show up here for when we're working on it.
The big problem on the client side is the existence of folios and large pages, and they're quite chunky.
Yeah.
So we have small both because other end uses large pages and page caches files.
Yeah. And related to that is the next one down, handle BioVex natively in SVC RDMA. That's kind of what we're waiting for the RDMA folks to do is give us a DMA API interface that will either do folios or BioVex that we can iterate over in the upper layers.
Does the RDMA project care about folios?
That's not clear yet.
Yeah.
They're working on something. Leon's working on it.
Okay. Because they don't do a lot of native. Well, maybe for the NVMe kind of.
Yeah,
sort of.
they would. They care about all the storage ULPs.
Well, all for some definition of all that, but.
The next one down is replace the Mountie up call. This is what I was talking to. There you are over there. Talking to Steve about this morning. I think what we'd like to do is allow the kernel to resolve export paths without having to call up into user space. So one thing we could do is turn the caches that are already in the kernel into authoritative material and use the user space tooling that we have, i.e. export FS, to adjust the contents of that cache directly instead of it having to call up to a user space daemon to read files. Basically, when the system when NFSD starts up, it would basically push all that file content into the kernel, all the export /etc/exports, all that content would go into the kernel, into the cache, and that would be the authoritative source for the current export state. That's kind of what we're thinking there. So we could probably get away with turning off Mount D when we don't have to export NFS v2 or v3. But it has some other benefits as well. The upcall mechanism it's pretty old, and we can't do things like IPv6 referrals with alternate ports and things like that. It's limited in size to a single page of payload. And so if you have a refer equals export line, that is going to limit the number of different things you can, FS locations you can put in there.
Well, the other thing that we worry about is if you want to turn it on, is can't at least currently support this LDAP and this groups as exports and that sort of thing.
Yeah, you'd have to be able to upload to those, I guess. Yeah, that's sort of stuff.
Yeah, but we could use Netlink or something a little more modern.
Yeah, it's definitely right to, rebuild this thing. It's too bad we don't have a column called barely scoped, because it's kind of like, it's a barely scoped idea.
Well, I can
half idea, Chuck's got more fun ideas about that too.
I could probably move this into the unscoped columns if we don't really have, if it's really that fuzzy. I mean, I don't have a problem moving it.
I mean, I think it's something we want to do. It's just a matter of sitting down and actually doing the work, and I have like 3 or 4 other projects sitting on top of the pile for that, before I get to that.
So the next one down is support for referrals that use alternate ports. Apparently, Debian has not put the NFS ref command into their NFS utils until this year. It's been around for 10 years. So when I told folks in the HPC community in Europe that they should be using NFS ref and not the refer equals export options, they spit in my face. So because they don't have NFS ref and it's not going to be there for years. So I got on Salvatore's case and said, can we get this moving? And he said yes, but it's only unstable now. It's Debian unstable. I don't think it will ever go back into the older versions because they all run like an NFS utils version of like 1.35 or something ancient.
Yeah.
So we can't turn it on there, but we have got it moving forward for the more recent releases that the European HPC community seems to want, and they seem to like to have IPv6, and so we need to have real good support for IPv6 and alternate ports. They like having alternate destination ports in their FS locations.
IPv6 is pretty much a requirement everywhere. HPC.
Yeah. All right. We want to enable server to server copy by default. Right now it's turned off because there are some security requirements that need to be addressed. I think we need to get RPC GSS v3 implemented in the kernel. I think that's kind of a requirement for that. Yes.
To do a study.
It should be yes, I believe. So we need to do the assigned attributes to be able to authenticate to third-party server.
Yeah. So that one is that's weird. The one below that, yeah. Okay. The one below that, make max ops or compound potentially unlimited. We've had some complaints people who want to pile a bunch of lookup operations into a single compound because it's a faster single round trip if we do that. Our limit right now is 50. And that isn't enough for some Windows clients that have very deep file systems. They don't have a dentry cache on Windows clients.
Unlimited?
Well, the limits would be elsewhere.
Okay.
Basically, this is an artificial limit. And
Yeah.
I mean, there's always max RPC size and stuff like that.
Yeah.
You know, so eventually you hit that.
But you don't want to bump into that. That's a, I don't.
that's
You can fill up a whole thing when you're sending stuff. Why not?
the thing that we're trying to.
This huge bubble in the pipeline is something that you can't
Right.
break up, you know, it's like,
That's the
it
problem.
might be better.
We
to
don't
break
want
it up.
to tie up a single NFSD thread with a whole bunch of operations in a compound. So we would probably put a time limit on it and say if the compound's been running for longer than say 30 milliseconds, then it will return either delay or I can't do this.
Well, you can just stop the compound partway down, right? It's made up of
If we're allowed-
one operation.
If we're allowed to do that, yeah, maybe. I'm not sure. I have to look at the spec to make sure that that's.
Yes, you are. You can return
Permissible.
delay at any
You
point.
can say, you know, I'm gonna do them one at a time. You gave them to me all at once, but I'm gonna do them one at a time, can't you?
Yeah, well, that's why you have to do it, because you have to put all the replies in. So you look up each step, but you could get to a point where you just say, okay, I've gone over time.
Yeah, you can
This-
say,
Now we'll just say delay
Yeah.
for the rest.
yeah, coffee
So-
break,
yeah.
see you later, I'll
And
deal with it.
so the client then has to instantiate all the entries for
Do the client
bound
support
and
that,
then-
though?
And then pick up and then redo, I guess, the lookup.
Do the client support that kind of breakup? I mean, I'm not aware of a server that's implemented that, so.
Well, nobody's doing multi-component lookups right now.
That's not true.
Yeah.
Lots of people are doing this.
Well, yeah, right. It depends on the client.
But this is the reason why typically we don't try to put too many operations in one.
The Linux client doesn't. No.
Yeah, because.
It's well behaved, I would say.
Well, no, because the client, I mean, the complexity that the client has to handle grows exponentially, with each operation. You have another stock point, that you have to manage and blah, blah, blah. So, it'll have to be on the clients that want to implement this to
Yes.
sort of handle it gracefully.
Yes.
And then they can complain about, how deep it needs to be and that sort of thing, but.
And it's always going to be one more the next year.
Yeah,
So-
exactly.
Which is why I wasn't anxious to just
So
increase
it's-
wholesale.
So it's gonna be an interesting thing. Just sort of.
So one of the things I've been looking at, just briefly anyway, was maybe plugging in a multi-component lookup into the BFS on Linux.
Yeah,
How would you feel about that if we did something saying there? I mean, and yeah, of course you'd have to have the client, the NFS client will want to do it. I think Fuse wants this as well. So
it will be useful. I think more than the actual string together of lots of compounds in one RPC call is going to be the ability to sort of skip all those stupid locks that we have to take all the time.
yeah, that's a good point.
I mean,
Yeah,
I don't care so much about sort of sending 100 lookups in one operation, but if you get rid of all those logs in there, then
I don't know that we can so much because I mean, the way lookup works, is, you want the parents lock usually for things, and you have to walk down and get them. You'd have to walk down and do each one. But I mean, it would cut down the round trips. I think that's really the only way. I don't think it would reduce the complexity so much at the
I'm not sure that trips are really that much of a problem.
For the deep path maybe, but most people are not running paths that are like 100 layers deep or whatever. Where it's
The Windows folks are.
When they do, then they cache most of it.
right.
They're not caching anything.
Yeah, well, Windows is not like that.
These guys are.
But for the Linux clients,
Yeah.
Okay. That's something I'm thinking about anyway. I was looking at maybe doing it, but I don't know. If you're opposed, then maybe I want.
I'm not opposed. I mean, it wouldn't be my top of list, wish list,
Gotcha.
sort of entry.
All right, fair enough.
So speaking of doing this type of trick, there's a proposal in the working group to do a recursive set adder. So I didn't say it was a great one. Basically, you on a directory entry, on a file, you say recurse set adder, and you give it a set of attributes to apply, and the server's supposed to go down and do it through the tree.
What's the use case for that though? I mean,
They didn't provide one.
they didn't provide one. I was about to say,
They just
but,
said
I
the
mean, what's
use
this call is
cases-
gonna trigger
the
this?
Use
right?
cases, you save on network traffic.
Yeah.
So I have to,
What's
I
this
have to
call will
stop,
trigger
I have to
this?
stop this conversation.
Set up all, right?
I have to,
Yeah, okay. Sit down.
we have to stop here because there's a lot more to get through.
Or sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
This is kind of going into a rat hole. So,
Okay.
the next one is, split, the RQ pages, array into a receive page array and a send page array. Now, this also goes along with supporting folios properly in the server. But what we'd like to do is instead of having, 256 pages, that's split between a send buffer or a receive buffer and a send buffer. With NFSV4, there's no guarantee that if you have a small call, you're going to have a large reply. And if you have a large call, you're going to have a small reply. You can have a large call and a large reply because you can build arbitrarily complex compounds. So that the underlying assumption that you could split a single 256 page array for every possible operation that would be sent to the server is no longer true. It hasn't been true for like 15 years. So I think we need to strongly consider a separate a send and receive buffer arrays. And I've been experimenting with this a little bit, and it does seem difficult to do. It's just a lot of old code that you need to go through and fix up. So that's what that one is. The last one on this to-do list, these are the things that we have a fairly good beat on what needs to happen, and they're not going to be too big. That's why they're in this list and not in the unscoped list. Ensure server-wide metrics used per CPU counters. Some of this has already been done, but oftentimes we're bumping counters that are static arrays that are defined in the RPC programs themselves, and that needs to stop. It's just bad practice. That's just very old code. So that's our to-do list. Now the unscoped, I'm going to do this a little quickly if I may, and then we can talk about what might be missing, that things like the drafts that you've written. I don't think it's Delsted on here. I think Delsted is over here under in progress. I don't see it. Yeah. Okay, so looking at okay, yeah, right here. That would
mostly done now.
Yeah,
So
we could-
once you get it first, anyway.
Yep, we can move that to the done column. All right, so back over in the unscoped column, support for GSSv3. I think we decided that needs to happen to support some of the advanced server copy features. So that's unscoped just because we don't know how big that project is going to be and who's going to do it. We wanted the second one down to service transport shutdown should be ordered. We want to have a little, there's some race conditions in there, and there's a lot of testing around it. And, it'd be nice if we had something a little more deterministic for system startup and shutdown. And that's kind of an extension of the netlink stuff we're doing. The netlink from user space can actually send individual commands down to the server and do the start up and shut down in a particular sequence.
Well, you want to be very careful to make sure the shutdown can proceed without needing to call to user space, because user space can't die first.
Yeah. Or at least have some reasonable timeouts if it does that.
Yeah.
The next one down is there are these space limits that can be returned in write delegations. I think today we're returning unlimited What that means is the server doesn't make any guarantee of pre-allocated space in the file system. We would like to support this. We would like to be able to let clients know, okay, you don't have to flush this. You don't have to send we don't have to send a commit. I think we don't have to send a commit if it's less than, say, like 20 megabytes or something like that. We think this is a performance accelerator for small file workloads like Git, on tar, rsync, things like that. So we'd like to see if we can do that, but it's going to require some handshaking with the local file systems to make
It'd
it.
be interesting to know what hammer space returns there.
Why would the client, do this automatically, just set, you know, the desync flag or the sync flag on the rights, you know, in these cases.
Well, if you want to send over the unstable, and it's all around the commit close. When you do a close, you know, it has to wait for the server to say, yeah, actually, I have all the space that you need for this.
Yeah.
That's what this is supposed to be working around.
Well, I mean, the client needs something to show that it is, but the data is actually committed on disk. If it sends unstables, then
I think what this guarantee means is the server is not going to return no space.
oh, that one.
Yeah.
On the delegation.
Yes, on delegation, yes.
Okay. So, I'll understand.
Yeah, I'm curious, what does ProtoD return a value there?
We return 0.
Yeah, that's what we do too. But unfortunately, the spec is not real clear on what this actually means and what you're supposed to throw in there. Yeah, so.
Yeah.
Okay, next, I've heard this rather persistent rumor that NFSD's read path is slow. I haven't seen this problem myself, so I don't have a reproducer, obviously, but one of the things that I'd really like to do is simplify the read path on NFSD so that we have a single path through there. We don't have to expand the test matrix to test both the splice path and the vector read path. And we also want to support sparse read, of course, properly. And so I would like to sort of boil this down, and this is in the end scope column, because I don't know how much work this is going to be. It could be impossible without a lot of intervention in the VFS, but it's something that I'd like to do in the longer run.
Does the splice part actually provide a lot of performance improvement?
I think it does. Should probably move up to the microphones so that people can online can hear you.
Well, I mean, why would you not go with just odorant? I mean, if you're doing that kind of, because I mean, you're stealing the pages, they're not going to go into the page cache.
If you're going to support sparse reads, you don't want to do anything. So there has to be some mechanism to say, oh, there's nothing back there. So, you know, if this is a read plus, then I can return a whole.
Sure.
So just doing a direct IO read might work for some cases, but it won't work for everything.
Yeah, no, as I said, I'm talking specifically about splice reads. So, well, they always seem a little dubious to me because you're not allowing for the fact that reads maybe the file may be shared by lots of clients. They may only be the same area.
Is it a problem that, I mean, it's a read, so you're not changing the page or anything, it's an inline, but just multiple frames going out. Right, so.
But once you start the page, it's gone.
I guess
I don't know
does
what you mean
Splice
by
steal,
stolen.
does it steal the page? You just
I
take it,
don't
you just take a reference to
Like
it.
a reference to it.
Yeah, you
You're
just
not
take a
stealing
reference
it.
to it. You're not stealing it or anything. It stays in the page cache.
Yeah, there's just one page. For a given page in the file, there's one page for every $10 piece.
Yeah, so did that change at some point? Because originally this splice read was still a page.
For userland, I think that's the case, right? You know, because you're reading into,
But not for you guys.
but yeah, I think so. I mean, essentially, we go in and do a read, and then it's basically splices the page cache page into the pipe.
No, it makes sense if that is actually what's happening.
I think it is. I don't want to look at this.
I think so too. I think the server is the only user of Splice in the kernel.
Yeah.
Splice reads.
It's one of few.
Yeah, not many.
So moving on, Bruce had an idea of implementing persistent NFSD sessions by providing some APIs into the local file system's transaction log, so it could log session activity in the transaction log for the file system, which would hopefully make that fast enough to be able to persist a reply cache. I'm not sure we're real strongly interested in doing this, but it's in here just to say we're thinking about it and this is the current status.
Yeah, I'm the first person who was being asking for it.
Yeah, I think that.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a priority.
And what file systems do this?
Well, I don't think any, but right at the moment, we'd have to plumb some APIs in to allow us to write arbitrary.
Essentially, you want to implement persistent sessions by hooking into the transaction layer on local file system.
Yeah.
And which
And,
is
and,
kind of a big engineering project.
Yeah,
Sounds like, and
and
it requires somebody that knows the local FS at that layer, and it may only work on, so it may have to be done per file system.
Yeah.
I think it sounds like a much bigger project than.
a lot of work for not a big obvious
Yeah,
reward.
yeah. I agree.
Yeah. But persistent sessions would be very, very cool.
Support for referring call list. This refers to information metadata in NFSV4 callbacks that link a callback operation to a forward channel operation.
Do we not fill that out now?
No,
Interesting. Thought we did.
it's a hard problem and we're not convinced that it will give us much of an advantage. So NFSD doesn't do this. And again, this is in here to say, yeah, somebody mentioned this once and this is what we're thinking about it. No. We had been sort of shooting the breeze at conferences about turning the laundromat into one or more work queues. I think it already is a work queue. So this is on scope precisely because it was just a sort of hand wavy conversation we had while we were drinking a lot. Already made transport needs to do read chunk overlap checking. That's a nice to have, but we don't really need it. So it's
Does it need to? I mean,
nobody breaks the rules, so it would be one of these things for developers who are working on a new RDMA transport implementation to.
if the client asked for read chunks that overlapped, why was the server to optimize?
It's not an optimizing thing. It's you sent me something that doesn't make sense, so I'm going to reject it.
Oh, okay.
It's absolutely not an optimization. It's
You're a stupid person. I'm going to call you a stupid
Yes,
person. and
it's
we're
a
gonna
sanity.
get done with
It's
it.
a sanity check.
Great.
That's what it is.
Okay, well,
We noticed that these are the next one is reduce NFSD write and create serialization. There are actually those are two set of problems that folks were talking about. Create serialization in the room earlier. Write serialization is there seems to be a lot of serialization on the server when doing writes. So if you send like 16 1 megabyte writes, that 16th write is going to have to wait behind all the other ones. It serializes every one of them, and so things don't go in parallel when you might expect they would.
Is that the file system that's doing this?
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
probably
it's,
not the best, right?
it's VFS.
It's the VFS.
It's the VFS.
Yes, generic, right.
Okay.
So again, one option is to use direct.
Yeah.
And a lot of them allow for parallel rights in the direct case.
What a bad idea.
Right. In the right case, the right path in the NFSD is simpler, and ODirect might apply to many, if not all, of the use cases that we have. And so that might be an easier one.
Aren't you gonna poke holes in the file if things go wrong? I mean, maybe that's expected, but isn't that gonna be ugly?
What would go wrong?
Lost connection, if you start executing them out of order, I don't.
Well, they're always gonna have, there's always a chance they can be executed out of order because they're being
They're-
processed in
They've
parallel.
all
Yeah.
arrived,
And
Yeah.
then sort of having to deal with this mutex.
yeah, so it's not any
there's no
new problem.
Okay. There's no order.
The next item is support for BTRFS subvolumes. There's some conversation recently on the mailing lists. I think FSDevel or one of those where people are again complaining about 64-bit or 32-bit inode numbers. And one of the things that came up was, oh yeah, well BTRFS can there you can have multiple inodes with the same inode number in the same volume because of subvolumes. Clones or whatever. We have to do something about that, but I don't know what. Neil has some design notes in this one.
Is there really a problem? I mean, I think they get separate file handles, right? Even if the inode numbers make sense. Because they factor in the subvolume.
We work around it today, but it's not a super duper excellent solution.
Yeah, I mean, the problem you have is lack of programs and that sort of thing that expect.
That's a part of the best problem, really.
It's not really an NFS problem.
Yeah. Okay.
No, it isn't, but we would like to make sure it's fixed.
Could we project the subvolume across I guess we'd have to have an attribute for that. Because that's my butter. That's the solution now is they
I
have the
don't want to solve
subvolume.
this now because we've got a lot of other things to get through. So,
Okay.
Sorry.
Sorry.
I'm sorry to be a Nazi about that, but
It's only problems like Jeff.
right, 30 seconds. Folks have been asking for PSK, pre-shared key support for TLS. We have X509 now, and the NVMe guys have done PSK support for them, and that they haven't done X509. We've done X509 and not PSK. So I think we'd like to do PSK for NFS. It's really quite underspecified, so that is why it's in the end scope column here, because it might require standards action. Plus, we would have to go and learn how to implement PSK. Yeah. Support for read-only file system replication. Someone mentioned this somewhere. I'm not sure that's a high priority, but it's in this list. GSS on the NFSP 4.1 back channel. I'm not sure of any clients that support it. I mean, are you interested in supporting it? I mean, it is a bit of a security hole, right?
Yeah, I suspect that we will probably just solve that using TLS, right?
You can, yeah.
Right. Because it's using the same connection as the forward channel, so the forward channel is TLS encrypted, the back channel will be encrypted as well.
Mhm.
Yeah, we're not worried about user all clear so much.
Yeah. So it's another one of those not complex to solve.
Right, and it isn't the top of ours either, but it's something that if we had an infinite amount of time, we might want to do.
Sure.
Next one down is efficient support for larger IO sizes. Today we have a maximum read and write size of a megabyte, and that is mostly because we are handling IOs page by page. And that means that the array has to be 256 plus entries large to handle a megabyte worth of pages. So one way around that is to use larger pages. So you need fewer array entries. Another might be to think about how we can represent a large IO without looking at these page per page so that we can support 2, 4, and maybe even 8 MB IO more efficiently without having to allocate huge arrays of single pages. The next one down is read without populating unallocated file pages. When you read a sparse file, when NFSD reads a sparse file, it will the page cache will fabricate all of the holes as zero filled pages, and we kind of don't want to do that. And so that would be a case where if we knew in advance that we were reading a hole in the file, then we would just skip doing the read and return a read plus, or we would point to the zero page and return and fill our XCR buffer with that instead of having to use a memset or something like that. So that is a performance optimization that we're kind of interested in. Currently, our session slot size, the table size, and the server is determined at mount time at create session time. And we kind of would like to allow it to grow and shrink depending on what memory is available on the server, depending on how many other sessions are in use. That might be useful to have, but that's not a high priority. This examine incoming X509 client certs. This is something that the FreeBSD server does. Is you can add instructions in the certificate that says if you see a client presenting this peer certificate, then squash all of this client's request down to a single user ID. It's sort of a cheater's way of getting user authentication or TLS user authentication without getting TLS user authentication. We would like to support this in NFSD.
Can't you do that using export?
That's what we would do. But we would plug that in. We would allow the client to specify the squashing instructions. He's got a way of specifying those instructions in the subject alternating field.
Oh, this is client initiated squashing.
Yes.
Right, I think the idea is that you might have you got a bunch of hosts, they all have different user certs on them, and you want to be able to squash them all.
For
to their
example,
respective
someone's
user cert-
laptop.
To their respective user.
Someone's laptop, for example.
That would be hard to do with export options, but if
Yeah.
you got it on the cert, then you can theoretically do it.
Server-side support for named attributes. We had a request for this. It's never going to happen because we don't have support in the local file systems for named attributes.
You don't want named attributes anyway.
So it's in here. It's not going to be done.
Only people that want that are virus authors.
I know, right? Support for larger back channel sessions. That would be nice to have, but I'm not sure we have a driver for that. In other words, we'd like to have like 4 or 8 or 16 slots in the back channel session table. So
Delegations.
that'd be a reason to have them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because the client can be aggressive on caching, but at some point you sort of want to. I mean, it's always better to send a CB recall any, because that allows the client to sort of send unused ones. But,
Yeah.
close up.
The client knows which ones are unused.
Yeah.
The server has no idea.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. So that is on our list. We noticed that FH Verify is called multiple times for an NFSP4 compound for every one of them. And they're kind of slow because they replace the.
I just identified that as being a
Yeah.
significant bottleneck for local IOs read time.
Yes. Yeah, we know it's slow, and we know some of the reasons why. There's memory allocation that goes on because you're replacing the local user credits every time through that. And most of the time you don't need to do that because they're going to be exactly the same before and after.
It's also calling down to XFS with the I know that takes a bunch of time.
Yeah, so if we could figure out how to make FH Verify faster or less frequently called, either solution would be happy
I have one that I would like to talk to both you and Jeff about
Okay,
later.
we're here all week.
Yeah.
We should.
So I want to get to the meat a little, as fast as we can here. There have been multiple hues and cries for NFS and Samba interoperability. That's a really big, ask, and no one has any specific plans for that, but it's in here just to sort of note that people have been asking for it.
Well, there is a bunch of work going on the SB side for that, but POSIX extensions, as well as Volker Lendico gave a talk about his work. They have some German government grant to do some of this work, so they're going to be involved.
Well, I think we have a common interest in how they store some of the Windows only attributes in the
Yep.
file system.
Absolutely.
So we've been talking with them privately about that.
Excellent.
And at some point, we will want to upstream the attributes that we use for passing on Windows specific attributes to
So you're talking about offline and hidden and things like that.
hidden system, archive.
I think we should, my opinion about that is we should have a Windows, top level text editor domain, and then you can stick those in there. And then all the file systems can store those in a natural way, and then we can build a
So this is
static.
hilarious because, you know, the
Non-statics.
the SMB folks have the same idea about the Windows NFS server's approach to storing some of the attributes on Windows. And so they're using the three-parse point format from the NFS v4 server.
We don't support that.
I know, of course, and I just think it's hilarious that these two things are sort of going like this in the same opposite direction.
Yeah, I try to reach out to Volker every time I see him. I just would wish that,
Well, Volker's not the only person with an opinion in this space. In fact,
understood.
Volker often loses the arguments, so.
yep, understood.
Yeah,
Understood.
okay.
So, anyway, so there's a lot of work to do there.
Yeah.
Here's the Jared ticket if you wish, for direct support for folios. I've talked a little bit about that for some of these others issues, but it's in here mentioned by name. Multiple service ports on a single IP address. The European HPC guys would like to see this because apparently they have a shortage of IPv4 addresses, and they would like to be able to serve NFSv4 to via multiple ports, and that would mean that the set of exports visible on each port would be different. We don't really have the admin tool infrastructure for doing this. So it's mentioned in here because they asked for it. I don't think it's possible to do.
It sounds
So-
like math.
It's not that you just need to use containers to really. do it. So-
Well, we said containers and they were like, ew, containers.
Yeah, and the tool is called IPv6.
Right.
But I
So,
think we can support multiple ports on the same address today because we can just open new sockets. Send them down.
right, but they all have the same,
But they'll have the same export date.
They have the same
So by the way, you know, the fact that somebody says view containers doesn't mean that you have to give.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, don't worry.
Babies do this too.
We're not intending to give them that one because it is going to be very difficult for us to do.
Yeah.
Right.
Containers is their solution.
Yeah. So here's one where Tom might perk up a little bit. Mr. Haynes, Dr. Haynes. Yeah. We would like to make the flex file layout implementation in NFSD a little more than the toy that is now.
I have plans for that.
Excellent. We can talk offline
Yes.
and fill this in as you. And of
If I
course,
had more time last week, it would have been done.
So
the V2 stuff that you're working on, erasure coding, that's interesting to us as well. So maybe after I get through these, we can offline add some talking points in here.
here, let's when we'd like to contribute development. Still in that area. Yeah, so one is it makes sense to build out something that can actually be used usefully for testing. But the other thing is
That's our main interest right there.
but the other thing is, you know, the Let's V2 stuff coming out. You know, we also want made accessible, and allow people to benefit from, the ability to do, erasure coding, that sort of thing. All these things are useful.
Oh, great. I'm glad we have some common ground there. We're very interested in being able to give a testing platform to distributions that might not have a close relationship with Hammerspace. That's kind of the key interest there. The next one down is it's kind of a to-do for me. It's not sure that we need to, that the NFS server needs to release its reply send buffer pages anymore. Traditionally, before I think last year's work by David Howells in the network and the TCP in the socket layer, NFSD had to get and put pages, each page in the reply buffer, and the RDMA transport followed suit there, just because there was some generic infrastructure that sort of did that for us automatically. But now it's not, the socket doesn't need to do that. It handles all that under the covers. So I think we can take that infrastructure out of NFSD, at least out of the RPC transport layer. So that's what that is. It's kind of a to-do for me to look into. Write delegations can return a single ACE that describe users that are allowed to do opens on the file without having to go back to the server. Currently, we don't fill that ACE in when we return a write delegation, but we would like to. I don't know if Hammerspace does that or not.
No,
Basically, it squashes an access.
the client doesn't bother with even looking at that case.
Oh, that's an interesting data point. Good. Good. The next one down is mentioning open telemetry. I talked a little with Trondon, Tom, about that. Open telemetry is a distributed tracing standard that we might use because we've got, of course, clients and servers, and we've got things going on between the two of them that basically an RPC transaction happens between the two hosts, and open telemetry is exactly for that kind of use case. And I was thinking that maybe we could build that into the trace function, the trace points that we have in the kernel now. That's a very long-term project. I have talked to Steve Rosted about that, and he's kind of interested, but he's not interested enough to spend any time on it. Okay. He'd be interested in looking at patches. So. Next one is support for complex device configurations with PNFS block. Basically, today we do PNFS block configurations where there's one LUN exposed and it has the complete XFS file system on it. And this is why I asked you about erasure coding for block layout types. We'd basically like to have the ability to have an XFS file system that's spread across multiple LUNs or perhaps even multiple iSCSI targets, so that the client can open multiple connections to those and see a better performance. But Ben sort of pissed on my cloud when I suggest that it might be a little harder than I would like it to be. So we need some support in XFS. It'd also be nice to support PNFS block in BTRFS and DXC4. But BTRFS, for example, has multiple volume support. So the next one down is support PubFH and WebNFS. That was a request. Actually, the PubFH stuff is done already. WebNFS, I'm not sure we really care about that, but it doesn't seem like it'd be hard to implement. So it's on the list.
Or should we have to text?
And then the last, but by far not the least item is support for the upcoming POSIX cycles draft. and Rick is doing a lot of that homework for us already. So that kind of makes me happy.
So I have a couple to add to that.
Excellent. That's what this meeting is for. Shoot.
One is pass-through apples, for, NFSD for proxy. Currently, the NFSD interprets those apples, sort of maps them into POSIX apples, and then doesn't pass them to the file system, but just sort of does the X out thing, which gets very, very confused. So, and that's the bottom thing. So we really should implement before Apple. So that case.
Okay, next.
The other is the one that I talked about with you earlier today. Just 2 seconds. I'll get back to it.
So, Tom, you have 2 other drafts besides Delsted. Is there
Land week cache consistency,
layout?
week cache consistency. So
Just WCC.
yeah, basically as the client is getting return values from the data servers, it can send those over to the metadata server to avoid get atters. And then layout recovery is
So I meant to ask, does NFSD support any layout where recovery is needed, or does that appropriate for any layout type?
appropriate for any layout.
Okay, so we'll add this. And then Rob, what was it?
So mine was turning on blocks in
Right.
NFSD for file systems that are proxy NFSV4 because that can't be supported.
Right, yeah.
Yes. Okay, on the phone, if you're still with us, I know this is long and droning, but if you have anything you'd like to add to this list? Alice, Olga? And you don't have to respond now, you can send me an email later.
So, Ron mentioned it earlier, but prospect of being able to extend ODirect from the client all the way through to the server. Don't know where that rates for you, but it'd be interesting for you.
The protocol doesn't really understand ODirect.
I know that.
You know,
Yeah,
so,
but uncacheable will allow that
oh,
as
is
an
that,
attribute.
okay.
So I'm not sure, I mean, we had our doubts about ODirect back in 2005 and the impact that one ODirect application would have on how much network IO would increase because, there's no cache hit on the client. If we've got a lot of applications on a lot of clients doing that, that seems like something that we need to investigate before we say, yeah, wholesale, this is a good idea, and here's how we want to allow it. Otherwise, if it looks like if there are cases where it might have negative impacts on unsuspecting neighbors, maybe we need to have a way of restricting it or curtailing it or controlling it or limiting bandwidth or something. It'd be easy for an ODirect, a fully uncached path to cause a denial of service. So I'd be concerned about how we can mitigate that.
Well, there is actually there is actually a way to pass that information spec already, and that is the advice support. If you remember,
IO hints.
the NFSD 4.2 support for advice.
IO hints. Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly what that is.
And there is an option there to pass through sort of the won't want to tell you that you don't need to cache this.
Yeah, won't need, I think it's called.
Yeah.
Yes.
When
Yeah, SMB actually has two cacheable flags, one for the client, one for the server. And depending on how you open the handle, you could steer around the cache on both sides of the wire.
But as as to whether or not that should be plugged into direct, that's a different matter.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure we understand what the APIs need to look like.
I remember Dean.
I'm certainly not. I don't have a strong opinion about rejecting it outright today. I just think there are a lot of areas that need to be considered before, you put together a patch that, like, we need to figure some stuff out.
Sure.
But, I mean, I think one of the things that came up while we were going through this before is, changing, the read or write paths on NFSD to use direct IO in certain cases, or in all cases. And I could probably add that to this list as a start. Ben, do you have any projects you'd like to add to this list?
I don't, I think this is great, this is the first time I've seen this.
Yeah, this is not, I don't make this widely public, just because I don't want people coming in here and spamming it. So I'm kind of the moderator for this list.
Well, I may sneak in later and put like a HA server option, active HA in there, but I think we've always wondered how to share state between the separate instances in a fast way.
Let me add built-in high availability support, built-in support for high availability.
After that,
Yeah, I know it was a little different. A little more.
So you,
And said HA, so, yeah.
I mean, you kind of need a cluster file system on the back end.
You kind of do, but you need a
You
good
don't get
cluster.
this,
Yeah,
And then you need to share the state. You have to.
right, that's the hard part. Not been written.
yeah, I don't have an objection to, we're putting this in the unscope column just so that we can note that somebody thought this was an interesting thing to pursue and a parking place for us to add ideas if we have them.
So the companies have born and died on trying to implement it for.
I didn't say we'd do that.
We just put it in the column.
We should just put that in the column.
Unscoped.
Okay.
It's in the pie in the sky column.
It's fine, yeah.
Yeah.
So
I'm
anything-
sure if you go into Red Hat Bugzilla, that you'll find a 20-year-old bug sitting out there.
Woohoo.
Somebody asked for that. Academically.
Yeah, there is. Rick Wheeler asked me to look at this,
Okay,
like
so
2011. So,
So is there anything on your favorites list that you might want to add to this?
I'm thinking about it. I mean, the obvious one from the SMB side of the world is, we don't work together. We all have our own solutions and none of them interoperate and it's two worlds,
That
right?
seems like more of a process challenge.
It's not there's no implementation
Right.
requirement yet, right?
Right.
But I would not lose that from the goals.
Oh, I totally agree. I totally agree. I would like to see more interactions.
so some of the protocol extensions that we have to do are to support SMB. You know, the
Yeah.
uncashed thing, for instance, is needed for space evaluation, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I just, it's tricky when one side decides how to solve the other side's problems. The other side may or may not agree with that. It just seems like it's been locked like this for
We
some
don't,
time.
we don't take sides, we do both sides.
Well, anyway, that comes to. I mean, tunneling into it, I'm sure that Volker would come up with a billion ideas of things. Whether he speaks for the NFS, the SB community, I don't know, but we could approach him.
Yeah, I'd be, you know, the only time I really see him is at SDC.
Yeah,
But that's a fine opportunity.
yeah, but it won't happen for another year. I'm gonna see him in April in Germany. I'm assuming he has to go back to Summit Speak. And he's ramping up. Those guys are getting paid to do this work now. So
I've also suggested to him that he or someone close to that community should be more involved with the NFSD for working groups. So that
Yeah,
they
I
can
know.
come over and tell us how stupid we're being.
He'll probably look at me and I'll have to take it on. But yeah, okay. I've sort of tried to avoid that.
I've gone to Jeremy's talks, I've gone to his talks, and they're filled with a lot of the NFS folks are doing this weird thing that's inexplicable and contradicts itself, and
Well, that's
It's
probably
like-
Jeremy, yeah. If it
no,
was-
Volker said that too.
Volker said that.
Which I don't mind, but I was thinking, gosh, it'd be great if he could have been there when we were during the inception of these features.
I think Jeremy, by the way, is increasingly motivated here because he joined CIQ. He's no longer just Samba identified. In fact, he's not allowed to work on Samba 100% of the time. He's paying the bills at CIQ. So, his customers are probably going to be interested. And therefore he will.
Okay. Yeah. Let's look for more opportunities for at least communication.
Yeah.
All right, I'll wrap this up. Thanks for all of your input and your continued collaboration.
You got a heck of a list.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chuck.
How many years did you say it would take to accomplish this list? 5?
This is a workboard. I mean, these are
I know,
arguments.
I know.
We didn't put any, there's no time on this.
There's a whole lot of stickers